my presentation at this International Congress of Crime Psychology was to introduce to an audience from really across, particularly across Eastern Europe and Italy, the idea of an investigative psychology. This is an area of psychology that deals with all aspects of the way in which psychologists can contribute to police investigations. It introduces the idea of dealing with police information and its assessment and evaluation, developing inferences from that, which really goes back to the idea of offender profiling, and then showing how you can develop systems that can feed into police activity in order to affect the decision-making processes of the police. So within the presentation, I talked a little bit about the problems of the idea of profiling is just something that comes from an expert, that offers up a view that is really more like a fictional detective. And I've been surprised that still people are talking about ideas from the 1980s, that the FBI have developed this idea of organised, disorganised serial killers, which really has been shown not to be at all valid, and which the FBI themselves do not use anymore. And those sorts of uses of early limited guesses about criminals can be very dangerous. And I talk about some cases in which the use of these sorts of profiling ideas actually interrupted the police investigation, and in one case led to the actual killer going free for many years because the police thought the profile pointed to a different person, and that killer went on to kill other people. So it's terribly important to understand that the opinions that are offered to an investigation from a psychological point of view have to have evidence behind them. They have to be based within a scientific discipline. And what I have done in this presentation is to give a number of illustrations of how we can use the analysis of patterns of behaviour to relate to aspects of the offender that the police will actually have some way of dealing with. It's no use talking about even issues, ideas like whether he lives on his own and what his relationships are to his mother and his pathology. You can't test people to see if they're psychopaths. But what you can do is you can get some idea of where there may be information in the criminal records that the police can work with, where there may be some idea of suspects, and where they may be living, some idea possibly of their occupation and skills. All of this can be developed through building systems that will analyse the police data. And so I've been giving illustrations of this, of the cases that I've worked on where we did systematic statistical analysis on the information available in order to give some sort of way for the police to evaluate the suspects that they have generated through good police work. I also talked something about the linking of crimes to a common offender by looking at the behavioural patterns and doing very careful analysis on those behavioural patterns. I talked at some length about geographical offender profiling, the idea of looking at where crimes occur and using that to tell us something about the criminal, but also to tell us something about where the criminal may have a base, may be living. And that's become a big developed area, and I developed software that I call Dragnet that is used by some police forces and is very much part of research into criminal locations and criminal behaviour. And I also talked a little bit about the work we've done on arson and how we've developed ways of looking at what the key behaviours are in arson. What do you look for, which is a problem in any crime. What should the police pay attention to? And you need models of what happens in those crimes in order to be able to see what's common across all crimes of a particular kind and what is distinct that will help you to identify the particular qualities of that crime. Finally, I spoke a bit about the recent work we've done, helping to see whether or not a rape allegation is actually false, because it's a big problem now, because appropriately and rightly, most claims of rape are taken very, very seriously. There is the possibility of false allegations creeping into that process in a very small number of cases. And so it's crucial to be able to have some idea as to when an allegation may actually not be genuine. And that's something that we've been doing systematic research on. So I think it was a general introduction to this idea of investigative psychology and trying to throw away this very old idea about the profiler as the person who solves crimes, rather than scientific psychology contributing to police decision making. And I think from the other presentations I've heard about in this conference, I think this is a very new idea to many people in Italy, where there are presentations from Romania and from Kiev and from other parts of Eastern Europe and Western Asia. To me, it's quite frightening that they are grabbing ideas from the 1980s that were never really very strong, but which have now been demonstrated to be actually wrong in many cases. But because it's so exciting and it's so sexy to talk about psychopaths and to talk about what they deal with the body and so on, people want to work with this material, and I hope I've contributed a little towards people questioning whether that really is the scientific approach and whether it could be more harmful than good, which is really what we have to do as scientific psychologists.